introduce you.
All right, I think I've done it correctly. My name's Tate. I'm an alcoholic. Um, Grateful to be here. I'm out of mountains of New Mexico is where I am tonight. This is my home for since I got sober in 1994. January 7th, 1994 is my latest sobriety date. Um, I had met with my sponsor yesterday, and he speaks a lot. I haven't spoken for an hour in a long time, and uh, I was thinking, should I write this down? Should I get a little some clip note? And he says, just pray and let it come out. So that's what's going to happen. Um, uh, so the first time I got introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous, I was maybe 14 years old. Um, Going back before then, the first time that I really probably could have used a drink, I was around 9. It's the first time I had deep suicidal ideations, enough to where my family sought professional help for me. And so I went and I remember a couple of instances of seeing a psychiatrist. Um, thank God there weren't pills yet, really, at that time. I'm sure if I'd have been around, you know, 30 years later, there would have been a lot of pills they'd have had me on. Um, by the time I was 11, 12 years old, I'd had my first drink. It was repugnant. The taste was horrible. I stole beers out of the refrigerator and I slammed them in the backyard. Uh, Later that week, one of my friends, we used to play hockey. I grew up in northern Michigan, and big hockey town. And and I remember buying joints from my neighbor, Huey O'Donnell, big Catholic neighborhood. They had 9 kids. Their cousins had 16 kids down the street. The Dietrichs had 15 kids. It was all of that. And Huey and Fitz were 2 guys that I hung out with and looked up to. First guys I smoked cigarettes with and all that. And so I went and I bought these joints. I smoked my first joint and had zero to report, zero action. And the next day, though, what I was looking for happened. And Huey called me. He says, "Hey, do you have any of those joints left? And come on over. And Lane's here, and we're gonna go for a ride, and we can match joints." And so we did that. And I went and I got just terrifically high, and I felt all the things elated. No bad reports. Later that week, probably I ended up drinking my first time to excess, and I was at a party because when your life starts opening up like that when you're a kid, it starts opening up, and you're going to the parties and you're doing the things and all that. And so I drank myself to vomiting, of course, which was a regular occurrence after that. I didn't know like till way late, till after I was sober, that a lot of people they drink and maybe they'll throw up 2 or 3 times their whole life, and that was I was memorizing American Standard and Kohler up from the very beginning. I had relationships with toilets and cool tile floors. Um, I'd kissed the wrong girl who was an older hockey player's girlfriend, and we'd fallen into each other's arms on the steps and almost gotten beaten up by him, and I ended up throwing up later, embarrassed myself in front of everybody. And I was home by 10 o'clock at night, and I thought I'd had the most fantastic time ever. I really felt like I was set free, and set free from what is a horrible depression that I'd had for ever since the beginning. I feel like I was maybe suffering from untreated alcoholism from the very beginning of my life. And when I found drinks and I found that freedom that I got from that, I just felt a release. Um, I went all the way down the road with it. Was in a small town, like I said, and so I started selling drugs instantly. It was just a way to, how else is a kid going to pay for his habits? I had a job at a boatyard too by the time I was 13. By the time I was 14, I was arrested for like minor in possession and for possession of illegal substances. And so I had to start going to see uh, like child, youth, family services, like that kind of a group up in Michigan. So I went to go see counseling for that, and then I went to another school. I went to this high school where I was just a misfit. I wasn't like other, and that was really the thing too, is I felt like sense of dislocation from the very beginning. I felt like I just didn't fit right with everybody else. And I thought somebody would come by sometime and be like, "Hey, you're one of us." Like I thought there would be like a maybe I'd be plucked out of this or something, maybe aliens or something. I wasn't sure. I was pretty sure I was adopted, all the things. I wasn't adopted, right? But just this feeling of other. And at that school, I gotten kicked out by the spring term. They said that he's some kind of a drug czar. I was a 14, 15-year-old kid, but Huey and Fitzy, they would send me quarter pounds to school. And so I would sell pot. And so that kind of, I got a reputation from that. It's the first time I drank a fifth of vodka, and I got it down in like 15 minutes. I was a big kid. I was 6 foot tall, 200 pounds by the time I was in the ninth grade. And I thought, man, I'm a superhero until about 30, 40 minutes later. And then I'm thrown up again and I'm passed out. And anyways, I make it home after that. By the time I'm 16, I'm trying to control and enjoy my drug use, right? And I'm not doing very well at it. And I thought, man, I got to get off these drugs. What had happened up to that time when I got arrested, I started working for my uncle on a tree trimming, it's kind of like they would trim tree lines for the power company, and then they would do dam work. We were in a hydro area on the river, and so we'd lay cement and we'd clean out the dam chutes and everything. And it was that kind of work. And my uncle was the kind of guy, he just hired ex-felons, so it was like guys that were paroling and stuff. And then me as a 15-year-old, first time I got to shoot dope. First time I started freebasing cocaine. It's before crack hit the street, and about a year later, crack became an epidemic everywhere. But So I thought I got to get off these drugs. And my family, a lot of alcoholism in my family. We just nobody calls it alcoholism even where I'm from. It's just like, yeah, I mean, drunk driving is just part of it. It's like in the big book where it's like the alcoholic life is the only normal one. It's just like that. It's like, yeah, you're gonna get a drunk driving probably. You're gonna get into scrapes with the police. And later for me that became they're gonna tap your phones. They're gonna follow you to places. You're gonna have pictures taken. It became the whole thing. And I thought that's just what life was. And it wasn't like I was sorry about it. It was just the life that I was allotted. Um, by the time I'm 16, I quit drugs, and my people had told me, "Hey, just like Bill," they said, I ignored my people's ominous warnings about liquor, and they said, "Be careful that you don't substitute booze for the drugs, Tate." And I thought that sounds crazy. Why would I do that? And the very next day, I'm drinking before I go to school. I'm drinking at lunch, and I'm drinking after school. And I become a real heavy drinker at 16 years old, a daily drinker. By the time I'm 17, the idea about not using drugs goes away, and and I was a criminal. I was a strong arm robber. I did a lot of B&Es before then, and we would steal guns from houses and sell them to a bike gang, and they'd give us crystal meth, and so we would turn. And so crystal meth became a big part of my story for about 9 months. But I don't have any bad. The thing about alcoholism is this: is in this book it talks about I'll talk about it later, but there's different differentiating qualities between alcoholism and drug addiction that Dr. Silkworth talks about a couple times in there. There's probably a reason why, and for me, crystal meth never called me again. When that relationship with that bike gang ended, it never talked to me again. I never did crystal again. It just wasn't a part of it. But when I start drinking, what I noticed is that I couldn't stop drinking, and I remember telling my mom, uh, I think I could just quit, but I can't just chip. I can't. Once I start, I'm gone, and I knew that, and to a heartbreaking degree, right? To a part where like I remember one night, I just couldn't make it home, and I was supposed to because earlier that day, like my mom would throw her back out, and she couldn't move, and in Michigan it gets cold in the afternoon in the fall, and she wanted to be out on the porch about noon, and so I put her out on the porch and get her a blanket and get her a glass of water, get her a book, and I'm nervous because I haven't had a drink. It's been a while, and I go, I got to go. I got to go wash the truck. Is what I've got to do. Um, it's always needing to get washed because I never washed it. I go directly to the bar, and and she said, "Will you be back in a couple hours to help me?" And I said, "For sure, for sure." And a couple hours goes by, and I'm looking at my glass, and I'm like, "Oh shit, I'm supposed to be there 40 minutes ago." Like, well, I just have one more drink. And then it's 10 o'clock at night, and then it's 2 in the morning, and then I'm passed out at somebody's house, and then I can't come home out of shame the next day, and then I'm drinking again. And it's like that. And it's not that I don't love my mother. It's like they talk about, these men with this important appointment to be kept, they're not drinking for any reason other than a craving beyond their control. And so when they would talk to me about, you've got this illness, right? That you have uh, this drive to drink more, you have this allergy. It really, really made sense to me. Um, but I didn't know about the strange mental blank spot. I had no idea that I knew I was powerless once I started, but I had no idea that I was powerless regardless. Had no idea I was powerless over my next drink because I always thought it always looked to me like I was just changing my mind. Like, because I would promise everybody early on, oh, I'm not going to drink that, but I don't care if I'm lying to you. But when I start going to myself, I can't drink. I'm not going to drink. There's no way I'm going to drink. And then I go and I drink, and then I am a baffled lot, right? And that started happening to me. So probably the last 3 years of my drinking, I'm drinking against my will. I prefer not to. People would always say, I couldn't wait till these people would get away from me, and then I could drink like I wanted to. And I used to say that, and I don't think that's true. I think what's true is that I'm drinking like I had to. I need to drink into oblivion, and I don't know why that is. And when I say that the differentiation with heroin or with other drugs, and for me, is that I don't shoot dope and crave to shoot more dope right now. I'm sated. When I drink, I get thirsty and I have to continue to drink. And I'm caught in that cycle, and I've never been out of that cycle since I was 12 years old, you guys. Um, Anyways, going down along the story, I'm mostly a drug dealer as far as my crimes go, and then retribution stuff. And I did some stuff where I would, you know, uh, what do they call it? Where you go and get money for people that are owing other people money. I would do that kind of thing, right? And it's just my size and my temperament made me a good match for that kind of work. And not proud of it. It's just what it was. Uh, amends come. Anyway, that's down the road. Boy, gauging this for an hour. Um, anyway, I get sober. Not by any trick of my own. I run into a truck on a bike and I open my arm up. I'm bloody. The next day, I end up staying at my parents that night. I'm 20 years old. I'm living in Lansing, Michigan. They live about 4 hours north. And I'm up in town, and they said, we want to see you in the morning, so stay here that night. And I said, okay. And there's a guy down there, and he's a dude from AA, and they all go around and they tell their sad story about what their relationship with Tait is like. And my mom, I know she loves me, and she says, I don't want to ever hear from you again. I don't want you to ever call. Don't write a letter. Don't drop by. Don't say hello to a friend. I can't stand to watch you die anymore. And and she'd seen me in the hospital. She'd seen me in jail. Um, wasn't the life that she had planned for her little boy. And I'm bleeding, and I got vomit and blood on me, straight out of the hospital. And this guy, he looks at me, he goes, "You look tired." I thought, that's right. Yeah, spot on. And he says, "Why don't you just go and take a break for a while?" So anyway, they taught me into going to a treatment center. In my head, I'm going, what would I do if I don't go? And I was like, well, I got a pound of weed and mushrooms to sell. I'll go over to Herm's house and I'll sleep on his couch. And I'm like business as usual. And I thought, this is the same day again and again and again. It was like Groundhog Day. It wasn't the worst day ever, but it was just like, here's this slow, this never ends. This is just going to be this way forever, Tait. And looking at it like that, I got open. That window of opportunity that I was able to crawl through got open. And I went to a rehab that had a detox in it. And about 8, 12 days in, I get to be in the general population. And in that time, I got like schizophrenic. I mean, and they'd called me that, right? They'd said you're schizotypical, you're sociopathic, you're manic depressive, which I think they call you bipolar now. They change the names depending on how they medicate you, probably. But all that, I had a whole list of things that I was, and all the initials that nobody knows unless they're messed up. Like I got an MIP, I got a DUI, I did some B&Es. We got all these initials if we're in the underbelly of life, right? I go to a halfway house out of that experience. I learn a whole lot there. I was 21 years old. Me and another kid were 21, and everybody else was 40 plus probably. Chronic recidivism. There was 26 people in there. It was a 3-month program, and they had a 12% rate of success of guys that would stick through the program. And uh, and I learned what chronic recidivism looked like. And I thought, oh, that's I started going, if you don't move your feet different, that dude's 20. I remember shooting dope with this guy in his house in Lansing, Michigan. He was 40, and I was like 19, and he got a little tiny TV set. Some of you guys will remember, like, you put tin foil on the antennas to make sure you can get the 2 stations that the town gives you, and a couch, and that's what he's got. And he's on the nod, and I'm just feeling good. And I thought, if you don't move your feet different, Tate, you're going to end up like him in 20 years. All you got to do is wait for the time to elapse. And I thought, that sounds lovely. And that was the last thought I had of it until a couple years later when I get sober, right? Um, I found out where AA was. I didn't know what AA was. I've been to a lot of meetings. I went to the meeting, I think, every night during the halfway house and during that treatment center. And so I was away for 9 months of treatment. What I got at treatment was go to 90 meetings in 90 days, don't drink no matter what, meeting makers make it. A lot of this kind of stuff they would talk about, these platitudes of, how a young fella could stay sober, maybe. And so, and a big book. I got a big book too. And so I get down the road with that, and I go back to my hometown, and all my friends are there, Herm and Rory, and they're all, ain't nobody changed their life. I'm a good guy. When Herm got out of treatment and he was feeling crummy, I got him high. Now I know people that have died behind that, right? I'm not trying to hurt anybody. It's the only way I know to stay well, right? I'm trying to save my friend's life, and I want to bring him comfort. And so that's kind of what I went to. Like I got out and I'm like, well, I'll just live this life sober. And I found out about, you could be with girls sober. You could, because I mean, I hadn't been since I was 12 years old, right? And anyways, I did some crimes during that summer, and I kept selling dope, and as if that's not a crime. Uh, and I ended up filling out a bunch of applications to go to this school in New Mexico. And my friends had turned me on too. They said, maybe now you can change your life, and maybe now you can get it together. And this school is like a great books program. It's a set curriculum. You can learn historically from the basis of Western civilization up through current times. And I thought, sounds great, man. I need to escape. The FBI is coming down on Rory. We got paperwork on Skull. Like there's trouble all around me, and I'm trying to not be in this life. And um, so I left, and I went to New Mexico, and I found a tattoo parlor, but I did not really find Alcoholics Anonymous too much. I went there a couple times, and the odds are real hard to find somebody that you connect with in a small town of an older community. And so here's people that are 9 to 5ers. I'm not. I thought, man, I didn't need all this, and all the stuff that I learned in the treatment centers, I just left behind me, and I kept doing all the same stuff I was doing. I ended up going back home for Christmas, and I went to an AA meeting when I got home, and I said, hey, I'm Tait, alcoholic, and I think I'm just gonna smoke pot now and then and drink on the weekends, and I think things are gonna be good. And this little lady got up and she says, this is for people that would like recovery. You seem good. Why don't you get on down the road? And I thought, God, these AAs, the first guy told me I looked tired, and he was so right. And she said, these are smart people. Yeah, I'm going to get on down the road. And so I did that. What I found out was that alcoholism will demand treatment. And if I don't treat it by a spiritual method, I'm going to treat it by drinking. It gets hungry inside of me. This progressiveness of this illness is tremendous. The third chapter talks about that a little bit. He talks about a man of great earning capacity at 30 decides he can't have another drop until 55, and then the carpet slippers come out, and in 4 years he's dead, right? In 4 years he's dead. And then Bill says one of the only mistakes I think that's in the book, he says he picked up right where he left off at 30. I would argue that he would have lived longer at 30 if he kept drinking, but the progressiveness of the illness grew inside that man while he hadn't had drinks. I had drinks for 3 days, and then wanted to not have drinks because I was supposed to see my mama because it was around Christmas time. And I got started shaking and sweating, and I felt so horrible that I go, oh, there's 2 beers in the fridge, and I drank those, and I felt right as rain. And I thought, you've got this thing that they call it, you're an alcoholic. And I had an ounce of cocaine in my pocket because, when I went out from that meeting, I swear to God, I'm only going to smoke pot and I'm going to drink now and again. And I see this guy that I'd had dealings with, and I said, hey, can you get me an ounce of coke? Yep, cool. And I go and I sit down between Jeff and John, and Jeff loves crystal meth, and John's a crackhead, and they both drink very consumptively, and they were very disappointed when I ordered a vodka tonic. They said, "What are you doing? Are you joking? Is this you're doing a clown thing?" Or I said, "I just want to see what it's like." See, that's what it tells me. It says, "I just want to see what it's like." It'll find some reason to just come on me and be like, "It's a good idea, and here's why." And I couldn't have that drink, man. And I ordered a double shot of wild turkey, and I knocked it back because it felt like I needed something to get over the hump. And and Jeff says, I remember him heartbroken. He goes, "You're the only one that got out. What are you doing, man?" And John got up and left, disgusted. He's a crackhead. These are scumbags. Jeff died 2 years ago on a fentanyl overdose. Um, I went over to Rory's house, and he was always trying to get clean long enough so that he could get high better. And I don't know if you know those types or not, but all of my friends are like that. And but we couldn't ever last a day. And so he said, "Hey, he's looking at me like it's an experiment. What's it like? What's it like?" And I go, "It's like the calendar went, and it was yesterday. It was like no time passed at all. It was like I was right back in it. I ended up overdosed 12 days later. I'm drinking wild turkey, and I'm shooting morphine that I've stolen because I'm a ghoul. I've stolen off the deathbed of my grandmother, and it was the second grave I robbed, right, in my life, because the dying have great dope. And I'm sorry, I don't say that again with any pride. You know, it's me trying to manage my own life. Uh, I come out of overdose, and the phone's ringing. I'm at a Holiday Inn, and woe is me and poor me. There's kids with their family at the pool at the Holidome, and it's this scene, and there's blood, and it's just all the ugliness. And my mom's on the phone, and I'm smoking a cigarette. She says, "I'd like to see you. We're supposed to meet a couple." I go, "I know." And this was on a Friday. I said, "I'd like to see you too." And she says, "When's a good time?" I said, "Well, tomorrow, because tomorrow is always a better time than anything presently happening." And she says, "Okay." And I said, "How about noon?" I figured I could get it together by noon. The reality of the story is that so much would happen between then and noon that I would be in South Dakota or something by that. I mean, I would be down the road. We hang up, and she calls back 2 minutes later. She says, "I'm afraid if I don't see you tonight, I won't see you tomorrow." And she's sobbing. And I go, "I think you're probably right, Mama." And I don't know how she found me at the hotel. I didn't know until 2 weeks ago. Um, so Dave Trudeau comes and gets me, picks me up. We load up everything that I got, a lot, which is everything any criminal would have, right? And I go over to Rory's and I dump it there. He's my best road dog. He's my best crime partner, and I love him to death. And I drop everything there, and then I go and I get dropped off at my mom's house with the rest of a bottle of wild turkey, and I got 4 blunts, and I smoke those and drink while her and my sister are talking to me about I should go to a detox or something. And I said, "I think I'm going to be okay. I'll just get down to the apartment in Detroit, and I'll kick, and it'll be fine." And that is what happened. And I got on a plane back to New Mexico. Uh, I walked in. I went back to the tattoo shop where Bill was, and Bill had been sober for a long time in the past, and he turned me on to these guys and said, "You should get hooked up with these two brothers that I know." And I said, "Okay, cool, fair enough, you know." And I went down to that club, and I saw Brian and Neil both walking up the walkway of the club, and they look at me and they go, "You new?" And I go, "Yeah." They go, "You new to town?" I go, "Yeah, kinda." And I said, "Are you looking to get sober?" And I said, "Yeah, I need to." And they said, "What are you willing to do?" And I knew anything other than anything would be the wrong answer. but I didn't know anything I could do to stay sober. I didn't know that I just felt so helpless. I didn't have any power like that. And Neil started reading the book with me and telling me to underline it. And I was up at this college at that time. I remember we were up there once together. And then I fell out. Like it seemed like a tall order to try to go through that book. And I would read sentences out of a paragraph, and then I'd have to read it again. I'd read it 8 times and I wouldn't retain anything. I was highly brain damaged. And I just couldn't focus my mind at all. It would just be that mind storm they talk about. And and then I started feeling better, right? Which is what happens sometimes, which isn't very good. And I start feeling better with no action. And they call that grace, right? A lot of time you don't deserve it, but you got it anyway. And I feel like that's the first thing. That's the first spiritual experience I had, was that first few minutes that turned into the first few days, that turned into the first few weeks of me being able to be clean, right? But it doesn't last. It lasts as long as your ignorance. And as soon as you get aware that you ought to do something more, that's a wrap. And my ego took over. I went up. I was going to go buy a bike. I used to, like I said, I had a past on me, and this one friend of mine that was with me went up with me, and we ended up getting caught up on a bank robbery charge, and FBI and U.S. Marshals and Inglewood Federal Penitentiary and the whole deal, and that's 30 days sober. Um, I get out at, I don't know if I'm 60 or 90 days sober, something. I come back to Santa Fe and I go, I've seen my mom in 5-point restraints. And I just throw myself in the program. I start working at the coffee bar. I get a sponsor, this guy, John Lowe, that starts to tell me about how to fill out a job application. And so he teaches, AA teaches me. I'm thrown away everywhere, you guys. And it's like, that's what I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous. I sat with a lot of guys that were alone at their deathbed, and because their families are burned out. But that's what AA taught me to do, is you show up, right? When nobody's left, AA's there. And AA had a kindness that I didn't have any defenses for. And that's just the truth of it for me. And so I stuck around, and I stuck around on the fellowship for a while, which is a great thing. And I started to understand when people would say, hey, meeting makers make it, go to 90 and 90 and all this and that. I drink behind all that shit. I drink no matter what. So you telling me don't drink, be in the no matter what club. Like that's silly to me. That falls on me, Fugazi. Like I don't, that's not a thing. That's the baffling part for me. And so when I go through the book, and I got blessed enough to go through with Neil's sponsor, this guy Tom, who, is, I mean, the lineage of the shoulders that I'm on, it brings me to tears to think about these guys, right on down to Dr. Bob and Bill, Don Pritz and Tom Porter, and anyways, uh, I start going through this manuscript, and they start talking about this mental blank spot, and they said, yeah, it would be academic, these findings about how you got this allergy, how you got this phenomenon of craving, if you never picked up the first drink. And they start talking about, what's the craziest thing you ever did, and I have a list of crazy stuff that I've done. And they go, that's nothing about what Bill's talking about. The only thing Bill's talking about is the insanity of the first drink, right? And he talks about it. What's he say? It's uh, it's a lack of perspective and the ability to think straight, right? Something like that. He defines it in there. And it's all about, like, what's the insanity of the first drink? And he sometimes calls us scientists, and he's like, the experiment of the first drink. And and what happens before that? And I start looking at that, and they start saying, one of these guys, he says to me, you can't put your hands on anybody in Alcoholics Anonymous, Tait. He says it's got to be a safe place for everybody, because right away I can find people to be dissatisfied with in AA even, right? And I said, no, all right, yeah, I'll do the best I can, because I come from a place that if somebody lies to me or they just say the wrong thing, sometimes I just touch them, and he says you can't do that, man. And he says you're led by your emotions, and he gets onto the bedevilments, right? And he starts talking about that. He says, you know, trouble with your personal relationships, um, and then it does you can't control your emotional nature, and I sure couldn't. And then I would read in the book, and it mirrored that, and it would say, watch for when you're, sometimes you drink without even thinking about it, and when you're angry, nervous, depressed, or the like, it comes with that. And what are those? Those are emotions, Tait. if your emotions take control of you and you don't build a spiritual container, you'll be lost and you'll be at the whims of your emotions, and your emotions will drag your physicality right into the next drink or the next physical, right behind bars. You're going to fall. And so, and he says, and then and there's the first time guys started talking to me about Eckhart Tolle and starting to be the watcher of my mind. And so I start thinking about that. And he says, and you're not responsible for the first thought, but you are for what you stroke after that. And so I'm thinking about my thoughts, and I'm trying. I don't even understand what that language means, because I think myself as me. I don't have any idea that there's different parts. I'm not hip to that, y'all. I'm a kid that had answers that were physical in nature and were defensive because I'm fear based, right? And I don't understand any of that. I'm just trying to not get hurt by you. My mom would be like, "Why are you all in black and you scowl all the time?" I'm like, "Because I don't look like a victim." I remember telling her that. What a thing to tell your mother, right? You look like you could get robbed. And that's just the way I thought. And I say all this because my book says, not tell them what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. It says, tell them what you were like, what happened to you, and what you're like now. Because the it is the same. It's society. And if I am always constantly, like they taught me in treatment, having to worry about my triggers or something, or about you, I'm a victim. I can't get through a 4-step with that kind of thinking. And so I just start looking at these things in a different way of like what's real responsibility for yourself, and how can you guide your thoughts? How can you force yourself? Dr. Paul would talk about that a lot. How to force yourself into it. You can have one thought at a time. It can be positive or negative, and therein is the construct of the rest of your life. The more you amass of good thoughts, the better your life will be, I promise. And for me, it felt like, man, that's hypocritical or something. I would have all this thing, and my sponsor was like, "You're a hypocrite anyway. Like, do it to the good side right now. Like, just try it. Try it for 6 months." And that's when I got in the steps. They said, try it for 6 months. I go, this isn't going to work. This is crazy. First time I came around, I looked at the steps. My friend Tony says a great thing. He says, I got in, I read the steps off the wall, and I agreed with them. And I wondered why I didn't stay sober, right? It's like we read the 5th chapter of the book oftentimes in meetings, and I feel like, man, that's advanced calculus to give a brand new drunk. Let's just stay on the first page of the preface maybe and talk about what alcoholism is, because I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I didn't know what alcoholism was. I challenge you to find, more than 60% of the people in the meeting that know what alcoholism is, as Bill describes it in the big book. The big book went out of vogue for years. After the 12 and 12, like people kind of moved away from that. And it wasn't really until Joe and Charlie in the 70s, 80s came around with their chalk talks, and they started to bring the big book back into vogue. So the guy asked me at a recovery center the other night, he says, what's the difference 30 years ago and now in AA? Do you see a difference? And I said, absolutely. They would literally say, where I'm from anyway, you're a big book Nazi. They would use that term, right? Like, how crazy. I feel like wanting to read a book and recover from alcoholism is a lot different than the Gestapo, but anyway, call me nutty. But that was the feeling, right? It's like you were kind of looked down upon for talking about recovery of alcoholism in the Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. That's kind of what it was like when I first started. And the guys that I worked with were looked down upon. I mean, they stood up straight under the fire of their peers, because their peers were on a softer, easier path, the middle of the road solutions of, hey, don't drink no matter what, kid, while people are dying all around them. And they're saying, hey, keep coming back. And keep coming back is great. And if you're new, for sure, keep coming back. But understand that sometimes, I mean, I've seen that door stick on friends, and they die on the outside of that door because people don't tell them the truth in Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. Because an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting is not Alcoholics Anonymous. The program is found on the first 164 page or the first 112 pages of the book, right? And the doctor's opinion. And that's where I get freedom. And so what it was like, or what I was like, was self-centered and fear-based and driven by 100 forms of it all over the place. What happened to me is somebody said, hey, would you like to try it a different way? And that first principle of the second step, hope, comes up. And I heard this guy Adam talk, and he was an outlaw biker, and I thought, he's not like me, but he sounds like he was like me. And the most important thing that could pop into an alcoholic's mind is I go, maybe I could get that too, you know. And I started looking towards that, and you guys were like lighthouses to me that were shining in the dark. And I thought maybe I could get what Jay's got. Maybe I could get that too. I just got to learn how to move my feet like he moves his feet. Didn't matter what I thought about it. Didn't matter what I felt about it. They just, and the guys were like that with me. They said, I don't, I'm not so concerned about your feelings, Tate. I'm concerned about your life. People have been placating your feelings because they're either scared of you or because they love you too much. And that's been putting you in jail and putting you in the dirt. How many of your friends you buried that you cared about their feelings so much, but you don't want to tell them the truth? I buried a guy in AA that way. I didn't want to tell him the truth because I come from a place where you hold your mud about other people's business, and that's just what it is. And I let this kid stay with me, and I saw the way he was acting, and I saw how he's under a delusion. His name was Rick. He lived with me for like 2 months. We camped in on a butte by a river, um, and he liked to he cooked meth for a bike gang in town, and him and a friend came up on a lick, and there's some race car guys here, the Unsers, and their grandkid and his buddies ended up getting kidnapped by them and held for ransom, and there was a double murder, and Rick goes to prison. And just weeks before that, spending time with Rick, I never said anything. So there's never a time now where I won't say what I think, and I'm thought of in different ways for that in Alcoholics Anonymous. But God damn it, they know my name, and they know that I stand up straight, and they know that I'll walk through hell with them. I'm just not going to listen to a lie or a delusion, right? My book never talks about any denial. Denial is an outright lie. The problem I have is when I fall into those delusions, the delusion that I can wrest satisfaction out of life if only I operated well, right? And that's one of the things that gives me my greatest shame because I could never do it. And I see you guys doing it well, and I go, why can't I just fix this into this way? And there's no kindness for myself. There's just a hammer, right? And that's what put me into Inglewood Federal Penitentiary was this runaway ego of thinking I can. Well, I've got good ideas. So it won't happen to me. Here's how. You know what I mean? All that stuff. Anyway, that's a lot of old days stuff. Uh, what I like to move into a little bit is like courage and that it takes to stay sober. The integrity that I tried to build and I tried to emulate in these men that came before me that I mentioned. Um, this guy, Trent Stewart, he's passed now, but he meant the world to me, man. And he'd say stuff to me like this cowboy logic, and he'd say, "It's better to shoot at something and miss it than shoot at nothing and hit it dead on." And just about like get out and try, kid. You're a young kid. Go try. And so I did, and I started to try things, and they said you ought to try things. I heard this guy Bob Earl talking. Bob Earl was talking about like health, and he was talking about like the totality of oneself. And I remember walking into the friendship club one time here, and there's this guy, he's 350 pounds, and he's sucking on an oxygen tank, and he's 25 years sober or whatever. And hey man, how you doing? Hey, Tate, every day above dirt's a good day. And I'm like, it doesn't look like it, man. Like like this is, I already want to kill myself. You dig? Like I'm already on. I don't think this is going to work for me anyway. And this is what you're offering. And then I started to hear these guys, these icons, and they started talking about taking responsibility for your full self and doing things that scared you. And Bob started talking about like walking around a lake at first, and then starting to run, and then running a marathon, and then having the audacity to think that he could write for television. And man, that was some big dreams. I thought, well, these dreams happen for all these other guys, but not me. You know what I mean? Um, I'd gotten a nice lady that was 10 years sober and 10 years my senior, pregnant when I'd gotten out of the penitentiary, and wonderful woman. Still talk to her today, and we got a daughter that's now 28 years old. But I was estranged from her for most of her life. Um, and she comes and sees me for Christmas and stuff now. But like those are things, those men's that I never thought were going to happen. I didn't think that was available for me. And this guy, I don't know, I'm like this guy, Guy Benny, he would talk about stuff. And I said, because I was feeling crummy, man. Like I was in that middle of the road solution stuff, and I just wanted to die. I didn't see a way out. I'm working for minimum wage. I'm nothing. And I'm the truck that you see on the highway with the sticker on it that's like, get it out of here, and it's not registered on that. Like that's me. That's my whole life. And I said, I just wish I had some of your gifts. And he said, you stick around, kid. He says, because yours are going to be way better than mine. I didn't believe that at all. Somebody asked me what it was like. They interviewed me because my life got different. My life got to where some folks interview me now. And he says, what's it like, to be successful? And I said, I don't know what that means. Like, we'd have to define what successful means. What's that look like? And he says, well, I don't know. What do you think it looks like? And I think about guys like Guy, and I think about Neil and Tom. I think about John Law. Think about guys that wrote letters to judges for me. Thinking about guys that bet on me when I was nothing in a horrible bet, and I had nothing to do but tarnish their name by association. And if those guys could look and go, I'm glad I spent the time, man. Maybe that would be what a success is, right? I remember John told me one time, he took me to a meeting and took me home. And it was the first time I'd been in somebody's house, after midnight, and I'm not robbing them. And his wife's asleep in the other room, and he trusts me enough to be there, and we're watching movies, and they start shooting dope, and I start to get uncomfortable, and he turns the TV off and says, hey, you want some popcorn? I said, sure. And he didn't like popcorn, right? He ate ice cream, but he kept popcorn in the house because he knew I liked that. Hey, he gave me a kindness I didn't know. And I said, John, I'm not an idiot, man. I owe you. I recognize I owe you. And he says, you don't owe me, kid. He says, you owe everybody. And he says, and you get as well as you can and keep walking the road and you keep reaching out behind you to pull guys up and maybe you'll be okay. And that's what I tried to do since then. I see that I'm getting so late. Boy, this hour gets sucked right up. What I'm like now is uh, I worked in a nightclub business for the first almost 10 years of my life in sobriety. I started a roofing company that still runs today that my friend is killing it up in Denver. I left that because I thought money's not joy, and I kept fighting. I had a fight career, and I ran that down the road for 10 years, and I got to go to travel great places and compete with great athletes, and I got to be a professional athlete in Alcoholics Anonymous. Started, podcasts and companies. I've worked bodyguard for crazy people. I mean, it just sounds like I'm name dropping if I say things. Uh, I started a coffee company because I like coffee, right? I just started to, like Brent Stewart said, he said, better to shoot at something and miss it than shoot at nothing and hit it. And I've had all of those things look like failures to me in some way or another, but they look like the success to everybody watching. You know what I mean? People from my hometown where there's no authors, there's nobody going to the Olympics. They're like, how's this happen? And I go, you just got to show up for your life and put your fear aside. And I wish I taught more about that now. The biggest thing I got in my life is my relationship with God, with my Creator, with my meditation, with contemplative thought. If I don't have all those three things in my life, I'm lost. I'm in the wind. I got, I don't know, 6 guys right now that are current with me in the steps. A couple guys that have been through and that have sponsees now. It's the biggest joy of my life to sit across the table with a new alcoholic. What a privilege. I never thought that I'd be enough to do anything like that. I never thought I'd be enough to work at district. That was like for adults. And now I'm an alternate DCM in my district. I show up and I try to help wherever I can. I get to travel the world with my job. I've got a wonderful girlfriend in my life that I'm not trying to hide from. I've got responsibilities that I can't go into the gifts enough. But I love what Bill says. There's this great book. It's about the conferences and how that started, really, called "Our Great Responsibility," and he talks about what passes after fear. Because fear is so much of my life. I mean, and every bit of my 4-step is filled with fear, right? I mean, and he says, I think we can outgrow this fear, right? And it doesn't go into foolhardiness, but it goes into prudence. And then he defines what prudence is. He says, prudence is a rational concern without worry. That's to me the meaning of the slogan, principles before personalities. And when I can get into the place, my daily prayer, y'all, is God, let it unfold and let me have the legs to carry it. And I'm truly okay with whatever happens. I had a horrific brain injury in 2019. I thought I was going to have to kill myself. I had a bunch of brain injuries from police to a fight career to, I mean, the whole thing. I don't regret not one of the knocks. I've learned so much from it. I've gained so much from it. And I'm closer to my spirit for that. I had a stroke then 2 years later, and I woke up paralyzed. And I went to work later that day. I got in a gunfight on horseback with on this show. Didn't say anything about it. At the end of that night, and this may be a good place to start wrapping up. I thought, wow. I got home at like 10 or 11 at night, and I thought, you woke up paralyzed today, kid. Like, wow. And because that's supposed to happen to older people or something. I don't know, right? Like, and fuck, you've lived around long enough to get older. Like, ain't that something? And then I thought I'd be all right with it, because I go, this could be your last conscious thoughts right now. You could wake up dead tomorrow. This is what it is. And I really been all right with that. I ran after death my whole life. When French started talking to me like that, I'm like, well, let's go. Let's see what happens. Am I going to die if I make this amends? Let's see. Let's push it because I don't want to drink again. So let's see. And I thought you'd be all right if you didn't wake up tomorrow. I said, except for these two people where my books aren't balanced with. And so then I set out for the next couple of years to try to balance my books with those people. And I don't know that I'm there yet, but I'm better than I was. But I thought it was interesting that when I look at it and I go, this could really be the end of the road. What is it that matters to me? I'm living by divine appointment with the people in my life. They told me when I came in, they said, you got a lot of grace and a lot of mercy. Because I used to belabor the thing about like, I don't have, why am I alive and not these and all that kind of stuff. I said, I don't know what grace and mercy is. And they said, well, grace is getting something you don't deserve. And mercy is not getting something you do deserve. And they said, you're just going to have to build that space and build that spiritual container around yourself and guard yourself against your emotional nature and try to take ownership of yourself in this spirit so that you can clear the channel enough and you can flood God through you and you can be a lighthouse for people that can be safe if it's dark out for them. And that's my biggest hope in life. You know what I mean? It's like I don't have bigger hopes than that. And I think that's about my time. I got all this stuff to read. I got so many. Anyways, thank you guys. Thanks for spending Saturday night with me. And I guess I want to finish with this: is that if I live to 200 years old, I'll never be able to give back to Alcoholics Anonymous what it gave to me. Um, thank you.